Richard, that you all know, and thank you for being so loyal and interested in the stories. It's really much appreciated. And Shirin Ebadi, who is the Nobel Prize everybody knows, and a fantastic lawyer that cannot exercise in Iran. We are here today because Nazanin starts a hunger strike, and this is extremely worrying for all of us, because she is in very poor health since a number of years now and has been refused proper treatment. So on someone who is already very poor physically and mentally, a hunger strike can have devastating effect. So I'm sincerely worried. Her dream is to be reunited with Richard and Gabriella and to have a second child. And you better have a good health to have a second child. So we'll all hope that this hunger strike will not be too long and not too devastating. Although the regime has tried to picture Nazanin as a big spy, I can assure you, as her employer and her colleague, that she's absolutely no spy material. You could recognize that. I've been a journalist for 20 years and I can tell you Nazanin is not. She is innocent, she should be released immediately, and she should have immediately medical access for her both physical and mental health. But any woman knows that when you have a lump, you feel a lump in your breast, you want to know immediately if it is serious or not. And that this is refused to her is a kind of very slow torture. So I just want to add one thing, is that she has, since she been arrested, she has suffered from severe depression, from very moments where she was very suicidal, and it comes back and back. Serious matters with her arms, her neck, her back, etc. And all this has not been treated properly. Plus the need to meet a psychiatrist, and she has never been accorded that since she asked for. So we all want this hunger strike to not last too long, but we hope it will have the effects to free her as soon as possible and get this injustice stopped. So, Richard.
Thank you, Monique. I'm sorry, I prepared a statement. It's quite an important day, this one. Nazanin called me this morning to confirm from Evin prison that she has started this hunger strike this morning. It is initially a 3-day hunger strike. She and Narges sent a letter to the head of the prison, Evin prison, confirming that they had begun their strike. She also told her family yesterday that it was going ahead. It was a very subdued visit at the family, and they did not take Gabriella to it. Nazanin told me this morning that the hunger strike has 2 demands. First, that Nazanin and Narges be allowed to see specialist doctors to be assessed for their different health concerns. Second, that the prison give them a commitment in writing that they be allowed to receive any treatment that is prescribed by these doctors. There have been too many broken promises and too many blockages to rely on empty words. Nazanin also told me this morning that yesterday she and Narges were visited by the head of the prison clinic, who promised that they would be able to get treatment as long as it was step by step and starting with some of their conditions, and as long as they worked within the framework of the authorities. He would, however, not put this into writing. As you know, in recent months, Nazanin has been denied an assessment for the lumps on her breast, the pains in her neck, and the numbness in her arms and her legs. And she's not been allowed to see a psychiatrist, despite numerous letters from her and from her family, and despite this treatment having previously been allowed by the prison. There have been promises by different officials, but these have increasingly felt like an elaborate game of pass the responsibility. But there is a second reason why Nazanin prompted Nazanin to go on hunger strike. Just after Christmas, on December 29th, Nazanin was visited in prison by 2 Revolutionary Guard interrogators. A summary of the conversation is available in the handouts I've given out. She was pressured to agree to 2 things. First, they were keen to get her to agree to a new short furlough in January. Now, she was resistant to agreeing to something short-term because last time it was so clearly a power game, which had such destructive consequences on her and Gabriella. Because she was very wary of being brought out, so she could suddenly be brought back into prison, particularly in January. January has the next arbitration hearing in the London courts of the UK-Iran debt case, which is happening later on. She's been a clear bargaining chip at both of the previous two debt cases in May 2016 and August 27, and is not about to become one again. But what really pushed her over the edge was the second demand, which was that they tried to pressure her to become a spy for Iran against the UK, specifically to spy on DFID, Department of International Trade and Development, and an organisation called Small Media, which the Revolutionary Guard keep trying to link her to, like in the film of last week, but which she has no connection to. She was told that it would be safer for her and safer for her family afterwards if she agreed to do this. And she was told to think about it and that they would return. She has been terrified ever since. Now, I wrote to the Iranian Foreign Minister after this conversation a very strong letter indeed. There's a copy in the handouts, complaining that this was simply an outrageous request for the Revolutionary Guard to make, both to still be using her as a bargaining chip, but also to threaten her in this way. I also said I thought they were playing with fire, and that soon she should stop talking about hunger strikes and start acting on them, which is unfortunately where we are today. In that letter, I requested to meet with the Iranian ambassador in London and set a deadline of last Friday, where I would make public these offers. Obviously, that meeting didn't happen. And also, following the announcement of Nazanin's hunger strike, the Revolutionary Guard have not returned to visit her. For the UK government, I have requested a final decision on giving Nazanin diplomatic protection. Rupert from Narges is here to explain more on what that means. But one of the things it allows is that it gives the UK a much stronger claim to demand to visit Nazanin, and just to check that she's okay. I will be personally meeting with Jeremy Hunt later on today to discuss with him his thoughts and the broad next steps. Now, today obviously marks a new phase for Nazanin's story. The hunger strike is not a game, and my job here is not to be a cheerleader for it. But I do think it's her right to say, in the only way that she can, that enough is enough. My job is to ensure that her message is heard, and that both governments take responsibility for solving this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Sharon.
Hello everybody, thanks for coming. I accept the case of Nazanin and Narges as a lawyer. You heard about the Nazanin case, and now I want to talk a little bit about Narges. It's not easy for me to talk your language. Let me talk to my language Farsi and he translate in English. نرگس یک فمینیست و مدافع حقوق بشره که سالها سرزندانه.
Narges is a feminist and a firm defender of the women's rights who has been in prison for years.
او 6 سال قبلا در زندان سپری کرد، محکوم شده بود. She was imprisoned for 6 years. She was convicted and imprisoned for 6 years initially. و وقتی که بیرون اومد 2 مرتبه به خاطر فعالیت حقوق بشری محاکمه شد و این بار 16 سال حبس محکوم شد.
When she was released again, she was arrested with the accusation of human rights activities, and this time she was sentenced to 16 years of imprisonment.
و الان 4 سالی که در زندانه.
And she has spent 4 years so far.
نرگس مادر یک دوقلوی 12 سال است.
Narges is a mother for 2 twins who are 12 years of age.
شوهر نرگس هم یک فعال سیاسی که 14 سال در جمهوری اسلامی در زندان بوده.
Narges's husband also is a political activist who has spent 14 years in the prison of the Islamic Republic.
حدود 6 سال قبل وقتی که می‌خواستن دوباره دستگیرش کنن مجبور شد فرار کنه به فرانسه.
6 years ago, when he was in danger of being arrested again, he had no option but to escape and went to France.
و الان نرگس در زندانه و به خاطر زندان‌های متعددی که داشته به شدت بیماره.
Narges currently is in a prison and due to the harsh situation she has experienced in the duration of her imprisonment, she's suffering from different medical conditions. The prison's clinics possibilities are very limited.
وقتی که کسی بیمار میشه و امکان درمان درمان تخصصی داره پزشک زندان باید تایید کنه.
When somebody in such situation fall ill, then in order to receive a specialist treatment, the head of the clinic in the prison should confirm that.
در مورد نرگس و نازنین که هر دوتا این اتفاق افتاده و پزشک زندان گفته که اینا احتیاج به درمان تخصصی دارن.
In the case of Nazanin and Narges, both of them, the case has been approved by the head of a prison clinic, and it has been said that they need a specialist treatment.
اما مقامات قضایی دادستانی اجازه نمیده که اینها برن پیش پزشکایی که احتیاج دارن.
However, the judiciary and the prosecution office do not allow them to have access to such treatments out of prison.
و اگر این شرایط ادامه داشته باشه اونها با خطر جانی مواجهن.
If this situation continues, then both of them are in danger of a very severe health situation and even life-threatening situation.
و به همین دلیل امروز اعتصاب غذا کردن.
And that is why they have gone to hunger strike from today.
و باید بگم متاسفانه فقط نازنین و نرگس نیستن که در این شرایطن.
I must to say that unfortunately it is not only the case of Nazanin and Narges who are in such situation.
تعدادی دیگری از زندانیان سیاسی بیمارن که اجازه درمان بهشون نمیدن.
There is a number of other political prisoners who are suffering from different medical conditions, but they are denied the right to medical treatment.
و بقیده من حکومت ایران مرگ تدریجی زندانیان سیاسی و عقیدتی رو تدارک میده.
In my view, let me tell you that in my view, the Iranian government are preparing for the gradual death and silent death of the political prisoners in Iran.
وقتی که کسی بیماره و اجازه دسترسی به پزشک بهش نمیدن آخر سر میمیره.
When somebody is ill and he or she is denied to have access to medical facilities, so at the end she or he will end up in death.
و این اتفاقی است که در زندان‌های ایران چندین بار افتاده.
And this is a phenomenon which has happened in the past in Iranian prisons.
در همین ماه یک زندانی سیاسی فوت کرد.
In the current month, one political prisoner passed away, died.
اون مدت‌ها بیمار بود و درخواست می‌کرد که مراجعه بشه ولی کم اجازه نداد.
This prisoner was ill for a long time and he or she was repeatedly asking for medical treatment, but this right was denied by the authorities.
و از شما من خواهش می‌کنم که صدای بلندگوی صدای نرگس و نازنین باشید و اجازه ندید که اینها به سوی مرگ سوق بشن.
That is why I'm requesting you, I'm asking you to be the voice of Nazanin and Narges and do not allow that they end up in such fate.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you all. So we have heard Richard saying that on top of the health, Nazanin also was offered by the Iranian government to become a spy for them, which of course she refused. And second, Shirin says that the Iranian government is preparing for the slow death of prisoners in Iran, in jails. So this is serious matter. I'm sure you all have many questions. So if you want to tell me if you have a question and say your name and your press organization. Yes.
Leslie Chapman from 5 News. Richard, can you tell us a bit more about how Nazanin received this morning, her state of mind, what she was saying?
Sure. So I spoke to Nazanin this morning for about 10 minutes. She was actually quite calm. All of last week she was pretty desperate, very anxious, was talking about numbness in her legs and the panic and not being able to calm or concentrate on anything. Actually this morning, I think because it's now started, there was a calmness. Yeah, she said she had a headache and was feeling stressed and was talking about how she wanted to see what was going to happen with a follow-up to the conversation yesterday with the head of the prison clinic. Narges had been summoned to see her lawyer to find out. So there's turmoil, but I think for both of us, the last week has been a real foreboding as it's built up. Really tough, particularly also with the film coming out in the middle and everything else. And as I say, there's sort of these other conversations that we haven't put in the public domain, but that we're playing on our heads. But yeah, I mean, I think for me, we'll see how the next days go. If you think she has announced it's a 3-day hunger strike, we'll see what the response of the Iranian authorities is. I have to say, sitting listening to Shireen's words, I felt a bit less sanguine. This morning, speaking to her, it was all calm. It felt like, okay, we'll survive through this. And I've been reassuring her, but I mean, this isn't a game, and this is pretty high stakes for a lot more people than just us. So we'll see how it goes.
Peter Henley from BBC South today. Can you tell us what you think Jeremy Hunt would do more than what he's doing now? Might it require action from more than just the British government?
So I'll be seeing Jeremy Hunt later on this afternoon to find out how things are developing. And we discussed with, I met the British ambassador to Tehran on Friday, who was over for Christmas. And he said, well, listen, I think the Foreign Secretary will want to talk with you about what the escalations are, what will happen. I think they obviously wanted to see would the Iranian authorities relent and allow her medical treatment or not. So there's probably, I'll know more after we've had that conversation as to what he's thinking. I mean, generally, with the government all along, we've been pushing the government to be a lot tough with Iran and a lot clearer with Iran. And in fairness to Jeremy Hunt, he has been tougher, much clearer in public, much pretty straightforward statements. And to go back 2 weeks ago, around Christmas time, we were saying in the media we want the government to stop saying tough words and to start making tough acts. Well, now this is to see what those tough acts would be. And of course, part of that the UK government can do, and part of that will require international cooperation. So there is Nazanin. There are many other foreign and dual nationals held by Iran who are being used as leverage in different countries. That needs to be an international message that different countries work out together. It's complicated, particularly for the UK at the moment, but it is something that needs to be, it's much stronger if it's collective, and it's clearly a signal to Iran that this is unacceptable.
Shireen Ebadi was just telling me before the press conference that there are 37 B nationals detained in Iran today, at her knowledge, but maybe there are more. We don't know. Yes.
Zaghari, ITV News. What are you hoping that diplomatic protection will offer Nazanin, and how likely do you think it is that you'll get it?
Well, so I'll do a quick answer, then turn over to Rupert, if I can. So, in the very first, I think it does two things in my head. One is it signals to Iran enough is enough, and it makes this a formal dispute, as opposed to a consular case that someone's been treated terribly and it's very unfortunate and so on. The legal thing that I think it starts with, and the thing that we had written to the Foreign Secretary to ask for, is the right to go and visit Nazanin. So at the moment you'll have heard the refrain many times saying, well, Nazanin's a dual national, the Iranian government doesn't recognise dual nationality, so we can't visit her. Actually, if you grant her diplomatic protection, that shifts hugely. And if you think, almost the most important thing a country can do is to go and visit its own citizens and just to check that they're okay. So that is something that it'll be much, I mean, doesn't open the door, but a much stronger legal claim to do so. But Rupert, do you want to add?
Yeah, just to say, I mean, diplomatic protection is a formal legal process under international law. And really what it means is that the UK government steps into the shoes of Nazanin and takes her claim to become a claim brought by the British government. So the Iranian government for a long time has said this is an internal matter, but once diplomatic protection is granted, it's no longer internal. It's an interstate dispute between two countries. That would be a significant step, and as Richard says, it gives them lots of powers to insist on a visit, to insist on a formal complaint, to formally complain to the ambassador, and to enter into formal legal negotiations. So it gives them a lot of extra powers that haven't been used before. And we've, on behalf of Nazanin, have been asking the Foreign Office to assert diplomatic protection for a year or so. They've been considering it very carefully because it is a big step and not something that they have done before.
Yeah. And it is rather confrontational. Yeah.
Yesterday, so as far as I know, so there was a meeting yesterday with Nazanin and Narges. It lasted for about an hour and a half. He told Nazanin and Narges that he would, that there was a problem with prisoners coming along and claiming fake illnesses, but he'd been assured by the prison head that they weren't doing that, and that he'd now got himself approval that he would be able to grant some access, and they would start with, I think in Nazanin's case, it would start with an assessment to have the lumps on her breasts assessed, and with Narges it would start with having her to visit a psychiatrist. They pressed in the conversation, listen, it's not just one visit, there are a number of conditions, and he, I think said, okay, well we can, step by step we can address all the conditions, and then they pressed, okay, well what, commitments can you give if, for example, you move on. If, for example, then we go to the prosecutor's office and say, well, we haven't got any written proof. Because what the game is that often happens is you go from office to office, and each one says, oh, well, you need to get permission from the other one, and where's your written proof? So actually, to get it in writing from all of them, then no one can play the games. He got cross at the idea of having to provide written commitments and said, well, listen, if you want a written commitment, that's not me, speak to the prosecutor's office. So what he said yesterday was a promise that there'll be some treatment, and you can trust me, in a context where there's not much trust there. And I think there clearly was a discussion yesterday between Narges and Nazanin about what to do, and because in a sense going on hunger strike's easy if you've been ignored completely. It's a bit harder when you've been brought in and had a conversation. But in the end they decided that, listen, this has only moved at the very last minute because we've been so clear. We need to be clear that we've set our criteria, which are treatment and a guarantee to be allowed the treatment, and that's what will continue. So that's why she started today.
First here, and then we will go on that side.
Vincent McAvinny from News. Richard, did Nazanin say how the prison authorities have reacted at all to her decision to go on hunger strike? Is she worried that they might try to force her to eat?
So she was certainly very worried all of last week, and most of the reaction that we were worried about, which was being taken into a sort of small room in the interrogation units and had the fear of God put into her, hasn't happened. So other prisoners were taken into a small room and were warned about, listen, if they cooperate with the troublemakers, then there will be problems for them and their family. Nazanin wasn't. The only direct contact that she had was on the very last day yesterday to say, listen, there'll be an attempt to try and find some medical care. Obviously we've had last week things with the reduction of rations, restriction of phone calls, and there was that film about Nazanin and depicting her as a big spy, and me actually as a spy as well. We met at a spy conference. But it was not true, just in case anyone wants to call it. But in term, you asked the second part of the question.
Has she worried that has any other prisoners attempted this in prison that she knows of they tried?
The ambassador actually asked me this. There are fellow cellmates who have been on hunger strike before and have been on hunger strike for a long time. The experience does not seem to be that you get forced out. In most other cases, what happens is you get weaker and weaker and weaker, and sometimes end up in hospital, and sometimes people stop the strikes themselves. Nazanin was on hunger strike once before in solitary, and we didn't realise until it happened. What happened in that case was initially she was punished and various visits were cancelled. And then as she got weaker, her family were brought in to plead and intercede and say, listen, please start eating. So that would be my working assumption as to how the authorities will handle it. Of course, this is a much higher profile and higher stakes for many people, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Richard, hi, Adam Lutcher from The Independent. Forgive me, I've only had a very quick look through your transcripts of what the Revolutionary Guard was saying to Nazanin. Are you able to just, first of all, clarify for us how explicitly they sort of put the offer to Nazanin to be a spy? Were they actually using words like spy or agent, or was it more dropping hints? And then, once you've explained that, I'm just very keen to get your reaction to the Revolutionary Guard asking Nazanin to be a spy after God knows how many years of very publicly saying she's a dreadful spy.
So I think it's a common tactic that the Revolutionary Guard use, and actually the Ministry of Intelligence uses as well. And a number of dual national prisoners have complained about being pressured to become a spy or an agent. We've certainly seen people suddenly be released where there have been suspicions. It is perfectly reasonable, I think, when you're being held, to agree to anything to get out of prison. How explicit with that? Look, obviously, I don't know the fancy words used, so it's something I can't really answer. Certainly, she came out of that conversation terrified. She came out of that conversation with no doubt that she had been warned that the only way she was going to get out was if she agreed to, become a spy. I think probably, the words would cooperate with them, inform, follow up on certain organisations. It was DFID and UKA, which is the same thing, and this organisation called Small Media. In terms of how serious it was and what they mean, my sense of it was a way of scaring her. And of course, one of the things we've learned in the past week is that everything is filmed. Everything is filmed. So the potential for that to be used to discredit her later on is there. And I think there's a way in which all of this mechanism is about controlling and scaring someone. Particularly when under pressure, which is what, of course, our campaign has put the authorities under. So, yeah, I mean, how serious, I don't know.
The pressure on her is immense. Shirin, you wanted to say something about it?
I would like to speak a little bit about the manner the intelligence officers are treating their victims, to speak about that.
وقتی که کسی رو دستگیر میکنم معمولا دلیلی محکمه پسند ندارم.
Initially, when somebody is arrested, there is no reason, lawful reason is given to them initially.
و اینها شخص رو به صورت‌های مختلف ایزوله میکنن و ضعیفش میکنن و بعد مجبورش بهش توصیه میکنن که اعتراف کنه.
The next step is that the victim is isolated and put under pressure to the extent that the victim gets weaker and weaker, and finally they force him or her to confess to whatever they would like to hear.
و گاهی اوقات هم شکنجه‌های شدید میدن.
and sometimes they are subjected, the victims are subjected to severe torture.
و زندانی به خاطر و زندانی مجبور میشه به چیزهای غیر واقعی اعتراف بکنه.
And as a result of that torture, the victim at the end sometimes has to confess to things which are not real and not true.
و بعد همون اعتراف رو در دادگاه دلیل محکومیت خود شخص میگیرن.
Then the confession which has been taken or achieved in such circumstances is used as a piece of evidence in the court in order to convict the victim.
و میگوین خودش اعتراف کرده که این که جاسوس بوده یا این کار خلاف قانون رو کرده، پس بنابراین محکومه.
They would say in the court that look, the subject has confessed himself or herself to the accusations which he or she was subjected to, and that is why the court should convict and sentence the victim.
Thank you. Another question here?
Paul Peachy, The National. On the spying claims again, could I just clarify a couple of things? Did she give them any response at the time? Was there anything, obviously the timing appears significant, it was before the hunger strike, but around about the time of the 1,000 days, is there anything that we can read into that? Was there anything explicit said about if she didn't take part in any of these spying activities? And is it the first time that, when was the last time she would have received a visit from the IRGC in this sort of particular context?
So it certainly was the first time she's received a visit from the interrogators for over a year. When she was out on furlough for 3 days, the interrogators were calling her father and calling her, so she had some contact. In terms of the answer she gave, I don't. So I try to give as faithful a record as we had of the conversation. She clearly didn't want to say yes, and they didn't want to hear a no, so she was told to think about it. They have never come back. My sense of the timing, yeah, it is significant. I think probably there was quite a lot of publicity around the 1,000-day mark and the Christmas mark. The Foreign Secretary was very explicit in his criticism of Iran. He said that Nazanin is being held as diplomatic leverage and she's innocent, and she's not the only one. He was as clear as that. So there's in that conversation there's quite a lot of anger towards the Foreign Secretary as to who does he think he is and how dare he push us around. My reading of it is that there is an internal dispute between different parts of the Iranian authorities, a part that wants to solve the issue of Nazanin and other dual nationals, and a part that wants to stand its ground and show it's tough and strong and against the rest of the world. And it feels, if I'm honest, that's kind of a scrambling manoeuvre. Nazanin, I mean, I've heard many stories of people being threatened to promise to, if you cooperate with us and become a spy, then you'll be allowed out. My memory of all the things, and the first couple of days of Nazanin's interrogations, like 1,000 days ago, there was those, but actually from fairly early on they didn't try and do that. So now it's an odd thing to be trying to, it's also an extraordinary thing. And that, as you've seen, I reacted to it very strongly against the Iranian authorities, read a very, very strong letter to the Foreign Minister. Also was very clear with the British with Horace, British ambassador, that why I thought it was really, I think for us it's really important this is clean when it ends, and we don't get left with this leverage over her and over her family. And so for me, in some ways, one of the most ominous parts of a lot of the recent actions of furlough as well was the pressures on Nazanin's family. That's why we made that public. That's why we made these manoeuvres public. Is to stop playing games with us.
Yes.
My name is Ian from Japanese newspaper. I'd like to ask two questions. One is, how is your daughter right now with the mother? Is she in Iran? And also, I would like to know if the health condition of Nazanin could complete the 3-day kind of strike, because it's very harsh.
So Gabriella is fine. I mean, I spoke to her yesterday. She was grumpy that she hadn't been allowed to see Mummy. Yeah, in fairness, I'd sent over a new coat, so she was also showing off her new coat. I think she's still too little to really understand what is going on. So Nazanin said to her at the last visit they saw each other, hopefully soon that you and I will be released and we'll go home. And she corrected us and said, Mummy, I'm not in prison. You're in prison. I'm not in prison. And so there's a way in which she thinks of Mummy and Daddy in prison, but not her. She's living her life, and her life is with her grandparents. And she picks up on the mood of the family, and the mood of the family at the moment is pretty fragile. But she's 4.5. 4.5, you live in the moment. In terms of second question.
I'm asking how health is.
Yes. So I mean, look. In all honesty, we never know how bad Nazanin's health is, because she doesn't get assessed, and when she has been assessed, we've not been able to see the records. Without doubt, going on hunger strike is a big thing, and she's fragile. I think, if I'm speaking, trying to be calm about this as a husband, if it's a hunger strike of a day or 2 days or 3 days, that's a completely different thing from if she decides to extend it. And broadly where I sit, and like I said in the statement, we'll see how the Iranian authorities respond, and we'll see what needs to happen. So if she doesn't get the treatment in the next 3 days, and she decides to extend, then I will start to panic. And actually, I was quite calm walking into this press conference, and a lot less calm after hearing Shireen speak. But yeah, my job is to try not to worry too much.
Yeah, but it's a worrying situation, that's for sure. I deal a lot with slavery and ex-slaves, etc. And when you see the effect of this trauma, all this trauma that she has got since 3 years almost, it's a very long time. The PTSD is very complex, and so anything she adds to that trauma she already has is very, very important, enormous, and frightens me. Yes, here. Sorry, we cannot hear you.
AFP.
I'm sorry if I missed something, but did the offer from the Revolutionary Guard for her to cooperate as a spy or cooperate in some way, did that come with them already knowing that a hunger strike was coming? And do you see it as possibly some sort of attempt at an endgame by Iran?
So I don't think there's anything coherent in terms of endgame from Iran. I think there's always different bits of Iran pulling in different ways. My sense is that so Nazanin had been warning to her family, to the authorities, that she would consider taking matters into her own hands, and then later on clarifying she meant a hunger strike. And we sent various letters saying the same thing. So it would have been in the general atmosphere. I mean, in my experience of Iranian prison authorities, they're fairly hard-nosed. They're fairly used to prisoners going on hunger strikes. They're fairly used to all sorts of complaints, and they instinctively, they wait until you actually do it before really responding. I think that my reading of the offer was that it was a sort of scrambling in response to pressure, and I was outraged and surprised and wrote that in my letter. Is it part of a coherent plan? No, I'm not sure. I'm not sure it is.
A lot of questions on this side. We will start here.
Thanks, Richard. Stuart Hughes, BBC. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things, just picking up on the last question. Is this the first time since Nazanin has been in detention that offer has been made? Because it seems slightly surprising that a tactic like that wouldn't have been used before. And also, do you see a direct link between her refusal and the film that came out 10 days ago, or was that something that was being worked on already?
So the first question is it's the first time for a very long time. I think in the very first week she was interrogated and then pressured to cooperate, and then they decided it wouldn't be feasible, because actually the organisation she didn't have any contact with. So then they kept quiet, didn't know what to do. We went public, they moved her, they then built a case and tried to say you'll be a bargaining chip. And from June 2016, the strategy seems to have been hold her as a bargaining chip. Before that point, they'd got her as part of that wider project of picking people up and claiming they're infiltrators. They hadn't quite decided how to use, and they clearly felt actually on an investigation there wasn't much to work with. This is just a mum and baby on holiday. Yes, she once worked for BBC. She works for Thomson Reuters Foundation. Not much there to go with. In terms of second question,
the film, whether there's a direct link between them.
So the film is part of a series, and there have been 10 episodes, I think, so far of programmes about dual nationals, trying to say, listen, Iran is vulnerable. There's this big project of infiltrators by all of these foreign governments. Nazanin wasn't the first in that series. They started with the Americans and others, but Nazanin's obviously quite a high-profile one. People you'll know better how long it takes to make these films. I would suspect that series has been in production for a couple of months. If we're guessing on it, but in terms of timelines, I would think since September at the UN, there's been increasing criticism of Iran's treatment of dual nationals and holding foreign citizens as leverage, increasingly explicit criticism. There's also a context in which Iran's feeling very vulnerable, and the Iranian security services are feeling very, very vulnerable. But that's about all I would sort of see in terms of context.
Yeah.
Richard, you mentioned the court case between Iran and Britain coming up in the next few days or weeks. If you can explain more what is happening to that court case and whether it's going to have an impact in your view on the whole case of Nazanin. And can I ask Shirin Ebadi, please, can I ask what, in your view, you've seen so many people go on hunger strike in Iranian prisons. What do you think might happen now that these two have gone on hunger strike, and what do you see the impact of the authorities might be?
Do you want to do the question first? Okay. So on the court case, we don't know when the court case will be. We've asked to attend it and to find out where things are. And I suppose we don't. If we're honest, we don't know what the consequences will be for us. At the previous hearings that we know about, bad stuff has happened to us. So the first time we had the offer that you're being held until there's an agreement, and then after the October 2017 hearing, that's when we had all that crazy stuff about the second court case against Nazanin that was then later blamed on the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. We will see. We obviously have been pressing the Foreign Office to understand more what's going on, and pressing the other government departments involved, and we'll continue to do that.
Do you fear that given the sanctions on Iran, even if they did agree on the financial package to Iran, that money would not be, it won't be possible for the money to be transferred to Iran?
Look, I think certainly the tensions in the international context makes a difference. I'm not a lawyer, but I'd be reasonably sceptical about the narrow sanction position being the blockage. But that is certainly what we've been told by the Foreign Office repeatedly. But I'm not a lawyer on that. We've certainly tried to discuss it. I think I'm not sure that 40 years of dispute is caused by a sanctions issue.
Yes, Shirin first.
نازنین و نرگس هر دوتا بیمارن و بارها درخواست کردن که به بیمارستان و مراکز تخصصی اعزام بشن.
Nazanin and Narges both are ill, and repeatedly they have made requests to have access to medical facilities, in particular specialist treatment outside of the prison.
و پزشک زندان هم این احتیاج رو تایید کرده.
And the head of the clinic, the doctor of the clinic in the prison also has approved that, has confirmed that.
اما قوه قضاییه برای اینکه اینها رو اذیت بکنه اجازه نمیده.
However, the judiciary authorities, in order to harass them and pressurize them more, does not agree with this request.
و اینها به عنوان آخرین راه حل دست به اعتصاب قضاست.
And that is why, as the last option, they have taken on the option of going to a hunger strike.
و اعتصاب قضا برای نرگس با توجه به لخته خونی که داره، به لخته‌ای که در ریش داره، خیلی خطرناکه.
And considering the fact that Narges has a clot in her cotton, it would be very dangerous for her to go to hunger strike.
و با این کار هشدار میدن به قوه قضاییه که ادامه ممانعت از درمان یعنی مرگ.
By taking this course of action, you are warning the judiciary and the authorities that the continuation of the present situation will lead to death.
و این کنفرانس هم برای این است که توجه بین‌المللی رو جلب بکنیم به وضعیت خطرناک زندانیان بیمار.
And the purpose of this first conference today is to attract the international community attention to the very dangerous situation the Iranian political prisoners are facing.
و مجددا تکرار می‌کنم که در گذشته زندانیان تعدادی از زندانیان سیاسی و عقیدتی به خاطر محرومیت از درمان در زندان فوت کردند.
And I would like to emphasize on this, that in the past we had cases in which the Iranian political prisoners and prisoners of conscience have died in the prison because they were ill and they were denied to have access to medical facilities.
Yes.
Thank you. Katie in Zaram, Channel 4 News. Question to both of you, if that's okay, and for both of you. But perhaps starting with Shireen, I wondered what your view is on why Nazanin's case is different. Iran has released some people, but not Shireen. Why is that? And to Richard, apologies if this is a little provocative. Some part of you must worry that the publicity makes them worse. Some part of you must be concerned that whenever you do something, the Iranian government retaliates. I just wonder how what's your view on that? How do you de-escalate?
به نظر من اگر که صحبت نکنی وضعیت نازنین بدتر خواهد.
In my view, if we do not speak about Nazanin's case and discuss about it, this would be resulted in the deterioration of the Nazanin cases, Nazanin situation.
و ما امیدواریم با کمک شما ژورنالیست‌ها صدای نازنین بلندتر بشه.
And that is why we are hoping with the help of you journalists, the voice of Nazanin and Narges and others get heard louder and louder.
نازنین بیگناهه و فقط گروگانه.
Nazanin is innocent and she is only a hostage.
و دنیا بایستی بداند که حکومت ایران چه جور حکومتی است.
And the whole world should know that what sort of the nature has the Iranian government, Iranian authority.
It's a fair question, and yeah, you know, you look across the families. Different families take different approaches. My sense, I think the fact that we're so public, I think it's double-edged. On the one hand, it keeps Nazanin safe. The fact she's in the light, the fact that the worst things that happen to other people do not happen to Nazanin. It is also the case that it makes her case more complicated because it's higher stakes. I think from the beginning I've always worked on the basis that the Iranian authorities are not delusional. I think they're cynical, but they're not delusional. I think they are holding her for their own advantage, and they will play that through the way they want to. All I can do is try and change the balance of power, can try and get the British government to engage and respond, and try to embarrass the Iranian government. And you're right, that, we spent 3 years doing that. She's still behind bars. Others have kept quiet and are still behind bars. There are some who have kept quiet and are out. There'll be some that will be completely quiet, I won't know about her. Some that have kept quiet and are out. Not always clean, as I was saying. In terms of, it's a question we have within our family, meaning particularly me and my in-laws, because there's a cultural difference as well. So for me, this is just outrageous and extraordinary, and transparency is on our side. For me to say, listen, put it all out there. This is what's happening. It's mental. Equally, there is an element of our story that is clearly a secret dispute between Iran and the UK. It's not in our interest to keep that quiet, so we dump it out there. Now, both governments, in their different ways, counsel us to keep quiet. It feels to me the only weapon, the only point of leverage that Nazanin has, that we have as a family, is to tell our story. There's a complicated flack with it. There are others that choose not to do it, but I'm sure it's right.
And if I can add to that, I've seen and heard the comfort it brings to Nazanin to have Richard campaigning like this, and it is so important. He is a lifeline, more or less, He has to reassure her at every call, at every conversation, and sometimes she thinks he doesn't do enough.
But also, sometimes, she's not sure about me being as virulent as I am. So for instance, whether to put that last conversation in public domain or not, it's an open question where we didn't, necessarily fully aligned on how it.
The spying.
Because she's terrified. My view would be that she is safer and her family is safer if it's transparent. That's my view. It feels different if you're sitting inside a prison cell with those guys coming and pressuring you.
Sorry, Richard, when you say you're not fully aligned, is she saying she didn't want that out there?
Well, certainly when it first happened, and one of the reasons why I wrote to Zarif and I didn't dump it straight out on the day one was because she wasn't ready.
Yes.
Amihal. So what you've said is, how important it is for the press to be telling her story. But what else can we be doing? What can the British public be doing to help share Nazanin's story?
Well, it's an interesting. The moment we're at, actually, if you think a lot of campaigning that we've done has been kind of affirming care and support and in some ways that's more important, but in some ways, of course, it is, like I said, well, this isn't a game, this particular bit, and quite how the next few days go, I'm not sure. I think we'll see what happens for the next 3 days, and we'll see if this extends, and then if we need to organise an event in solidarity, then we will, but we'll decide that in a couple of days' time.
Yeah.
I guess for Richard, Mohammad Juman from Independent Arabia. What did the Iranian authority go into any more details about the accusation of being a spy? Like what sort of information they Nazanin transferred to any other governments, or it's just a general accusation?
So they've never legally convicted her for being a spy. At her first trial, and the charges stayed secret for a long, long time, but her first trial she was convicted for a 5-year sentence for membership of organisations working against the state, by which they meant she once worked at BBC News Action and she works for Thomson Reuters Foundation, with a particular emphasis on BBC News Action. She had a second court case opened against her, which was in October 2017, which was associated with Boris Johnson's comments in Parliament, which was spreading propaganda against the regime. And that court case hovers in the background, but has never come to final sentencing. So there's never been a formal your espionage charge. It's a national security charge. Now in the media they'll call her a spy, and the Revolutionary Guards before she was indicted said that. Recently, last week again, it was she's a spy, I'm a spy. So there's some big grand claims, but legally the charge is softer. I think if they're calling me a spy, kind of what they mean is that someone who's got annoying foreign connections and seems to be connected to the outside to foreign governments. But they're big on grand claims, not so worried about sort of concrete proof.
I think Shane wants to add something.
قانون ایران جاسوس کسی است که اطلاعات محرمانه حکومت رو به کشور دیگری بدهد.
According to the Iranian law, the definition of a spy is somebody who has transferred the confidential information regarding the government to other countries, to a third country.
و این معمولاً اتهامی است که در مورد کارمندان دولت ایران اتفاق میفته.
This accusation normally is seen in relation to the staff of the governmental departments in Iran.
یعنی کسی بایستی دسترسی به اطلاعات داشته باشه که اون رو به دشمن بده.
What I mean is somebody who is accused of being a spy should actually have access to that confidential or secretive information in the first place.
نازنین هیچ وقت با دولت ایران کار نکرده.
Nazanin has never worked with the Iranian authorities.
اصلا تو ایران هم زندگی نمی‌کرد.
And she has not been living in Iran. She did not live in Iran.
و فقط چند روز برای دیدن خانواده‌اش آمد بود ایران.
The purpose of her journey was to see her family for a few days.
این چطور ممکنه به اطلاعاتی دسترسی داشته باشه؟
How on the earth she can have access to such sensitive information?
And her work at the foundation has never touched Iran in any way.
The Foreign Secretary is seeing the Iranian ambassador to the UK today. Just to sort of distill what you're saying, are you asking that today is the day that Hunt says to the Iranians, you must accept that she has diplomatic protection, or at least that he sets the conditions and timetable by which that will happen?
So we wrote to him last week to say please make a decision as soon as possible, ideally before she goes on hunger strike. So the conversation I will be hoping to have with him today is what he decided. So I would prefer if he said she's got diplomatic protection. If I'm candid, I think if he doesn't do it in the circumstances like now, then he's not going to. And there's a processing and a discussion about why and so on and what we do about that. But I don't think at this point saying, okay, I'm going to grant diplomatic protection in 2 months' time if A, B, and C, things are moving much quicker.
We will take the two. Sorry, we have to take two last questions. One here.
I'm from ASU, the Iranian, the Persian online magazine. I have a question from Mrs. Ebadi. Why Narges and Nazanin has decided to release the letter together and now go on hunger strike together? And the second question is, how was the reflection of this decision and this letter inside Iran, in Iranian media? Could it help to they be here?
نازنین و نرگس هر دوتا در یک زندان در سلول هستند، در یک اتاق.
Nazanin and Narges are both in one cell in the prison.
و طبیعتاً اونجا با هم آشنا و دوست شدن.
Naturally, they have become friends there and they are living together.
و شرایط اونها مشابهه، یعنی هر دوتا بیمار بودن و اجازه درمان نداشتن.
On the other hand, the circumstances of both Nazanin and Narges are similar. both of them are ill, but their right to have access to medical facilities are denied by the authorities.
این بود که تصمیم گرفتن یک نامه مشترک.
That is why they decided to write a common letter.
تاثیر این نامه، مهمترین تاثیر این نامه آگاه کردن افکار عمومی در ایران و در جهان است که اینها در چه شرایط بدی هستند.
The impact of this letter, in my view, is to raise the awareness of both Iranian people and international community in relation to the circumstances these two victims are dealing with.
و امیدوارم که فشار افکار عمومی باعث بشود که اینها دسترسی به درمان پیدا کنند.
And I hope the increasing international pressure or public pressure will result in having access to medical facilities for both of these victims.
One last question.
Sharon is from Iran International. I have a question for both. We have recently Jason Rezaian case, Iranian-American journalist inside Iran prison, and at the end of all of this discussion, he exchanged with the airplane of the cash. What do you think? Is it the Nazanin case goes that way or not? And another question from Shirin. We have lots of Iranian in prison. They are sick and they are on a strike and they are in danger. Nazanin fortunately have our voice, but they are not. Do you have any details how many Iranian political prisoners now inside prison and they need medical care and they can't access that?
I go first. I think it's clearly a precedent in both governments' minds. I think when immediately around the time Nazanin was arrested, the Revolutionary Guard put out a propaganda video saying, listen, look, this is how we get results, this is how we achieve things. Certainly when they were making the offers, that would have been in their mind. Perhaps not as visceral as a plane and cash, but certainly that is an exchange mechanism that at that point has been in their minds. And one of the things I think the Foreign Office, the Foreign Secretary is mindful of, that you have to make sure there's no hostage industry developing and that there becomes a precedent of this being happening again and again. One of the things that in our situation is important to do is to push using the rule of law, to push using diplomatic protection, to insist that she gets to break up the sort of mechanisms as to what's developed. Because this is, this practice is terrible for Iran. It's terrible for our family, but it is terrible for Iran and for a normal Iran where people can go and travel and do business and go on holiday and see their families, and should be safe to do it. And one of the things I wrote, angrily to the Foreign Minister Zarif was that there's a part of the American that's in the grip of a protection racket, and this needs to stop.
Right.
دزدان دریایی هستن که افراد رو می‌دزدن بعد پول میگیرن اونا رو آزاد میکنن.
We have in the world pirates who get some innocent people as hostage and then they release them in return for receiving some money.
و من خیلی متاسفم که در مورد زندانیان بیگناه آمریکایی که پول گرفتن آزادشون کردن، دولت ایران دقیقاً نقش راهزنان دریایی رو بازی کرد.
And I'm very sorry to say that when the innocent American hostages were released in return for money, the Iranian authorities, the Iranian government was behind that and played the role of pirates.
و همونطور که ریچارد گفت، حکومت ایران نبایستی در نقش دزدان دریایی وارد بشه، بلکه صحبت از قانونه.
As Richard pointed it out, the Iranian authorities, they don't need to act as a pirate. In contrary, there should be the rule of law in these cases.
نازنین بیگناهه و به موجب قانون باید آزاد بشه.
Nazanin is innocent and according to the law she must be released.
اگر دولت ایران طلبی داره اون مسئله دیگه است.
If the Iranian authorities have something to catch in this. This is another problem, another issue.
و اینا با هم ارتباط نباید داشته باشه.
We shouldn't make any connection between the Iranian request in other area and the case of Nazanin.
حکومت‌ها رو عادت ندهید که گروگانگیری کنن.
Do not make the governments to have a habit of exchanging hostages.
و همونطوری که در ابتدای صحبتم گفتم فقط نازنین و نرگس نیستن که در زندان بیمارند.
And as I have mentioned in the beginning of my words, it's not only Nazanin and Narges who are in prison.
و در بیانیه‌ای که من تهیه کردم و به همه دادم اسامی تعدادی از این زندانیان سیاسی و عقیدتی که بیمار هستند قید شده. میتونید اون رو بخونید.
In the printout, the statement I have given it to you in the form of printout, you can find the names and details of other political prisoners, same as Nazanin and Narges. The names are there. You can go ahead and read.
امکانات بهداری زندان‌ها بسیار محدوده.
The prisons, medical clinics, possibilities are very limited.
و وقتی کسی یه بیماری جدی پیدا میکنه باید این رو به بیمارستان یا درمانگاه‌های مجهزتری ببرن.
In those circumstances, when somebody faces a severe medical condition, they must be referred to external medical facilities and clinics.
و معمولا در مورد زندانیان سیاسی و عقیدتی این اجازه خیلی سخت داده میشه.
However, the permission for doing so, obtaining the permission for doing so are very hard for political prisoners and prisoners of conscience in Iranian prisons.
ماه گذشته یک نفر به همین دلیل فوت کرد در زندان.
Last month, one person died as a result of this in Iranian prison.
Thank you very much. This was a very long conference. Maybe, Richard, you want a last message to conclude or to sum it up?
No, I mean, well, just thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you for keeping Nazanin's story alive, for keeping Narges' story alive. And let's hope that we are near the end.
We get somewhere. Yeah. Thank you so much.